just after 10 a.m., so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Stacy Smith, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Director for the Alzheimer's Association Oregon and Southwest Washington chapter. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping items. If you haven't already, please ensure that you've muted your microphone to avoid any background noise. Please also make note that if your webcam is on, all participants may be able to see you. Additionally, we will provide opportunities for questions during this morning's presentation. However, at any time, feel free to type questions you may have into the chat box on the right-hand side of the Blue Jeans window. So you'll notice there's a little menu on the right-hand side, kind of towards the top corner, and there's a little speech bubble that says chat underneath. And if you click on that, it allows you to type your questions. So with that, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to our 4th annual Healthy Brain Symposium. We know that things look just a little bit different this year, and we are so glad that you're here with us this morning for our virtual presentation. This morning, we'll hear from both Dr. Allison Lindauer of Oregon Health and Science University and Heidi Rowell with our local Alzheimer's Association. Together, they will help provide a greater understanding of cognitive aging and some of the ways we can reduce the risk of cognitive decline. But first, a big thank you to the Vital Life Foundation for sponsoring today's event. Amy Drahota from Vital Life Foundation is on the webinar this morning. Amy, I'll turn it over to you to share a few words about the Vital Life Foundation.
Hi everyone, I'm so grateful to be able to be here today. My name is Amy Drahota and I am the Director of Intentional Culture for Marquee Companies and Consanas Healthcare, their sister company, both healthcare companies in the senior healthcare space. And as a part of my position as the Director of Intentional Culture, I wear several hats, and one of them is the oversight of the Vital Life Foundation. And the mission of the Vital Life Foundation is to support organizations and programs that provide meaning and vitality in the lives of seniors and staff members living and working in senior care. And the partnership that we have with Alzheimer's Association, first of all, we've been in partnership for almost 10 years now, and we are very proud to be the sponsor of this particular series, Healthy Brain series, and grateful to be able to be a part of it, even though we're doing it from a distance. Typically, we do it on site at one of our facilities in Tualatin, and so we're glad that they've worked it out that we're able to get together, regardless of the fact that we've got some differences that we have to take care of. So. Welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for coming. This is great stuff.
Thank you, Amy. Now I'd like to introduce Heidi Rowell, Program Director for the Alzheimer's Association Oregon and Southwest Washington chapter. Heidi is going to go ahead and lead us through Introduction to Alzheimer's, which is an educational presentation that overviews the impact of Alzheimer's, warning signs, risk factors, and Alzheimer's Association resources. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heidi. Heidi, we can't hear you. Check and see maybe if you're muted.
I am muted. Thank you, Stacy. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, so as Stacy said, I'm Heidi Rowell. I'm the Program Director for the Alzheimer's Association Oregon and Southwest Washington chapter, and I'm going to give a quick presentation this morning on an introduction to Alzheimer's. So this is going to briefly touch on a range of topics, including the impact of Alzheimer's, risk factors and warning signs, resources, and we're going to talk about how you can join the fight against the disease. Along the way, we will hear from some experts and some short video segments. Please note this is not designed to be an in-depth program about Alzheimer's disease. So in your program today, you'll see some more resources about more of our classes and our web resources where you can get more information. But this is a great overview and covers some of the most commonly asked questions that we hear out in the community. Let's begin by taking a brief look about Alzheimer's and dementia. In this section, we're going to touch on changes associated with normal aging versus potential warning signs of Alzheimer's, the relationship between Alzheimer's and dementia, and finally, the risk factors. One of the most common myths surrounding Alzheimer's disease today is the belief that it is a normal part of aging. But Alzheimer's is more than memory loss. It's a progressive and fatal disease that kills nerve cells and tissue in the brain, affecting an individual's ability to remember, think, plan, and ultimately function. In this first video, a leading expert in aging, Alzheimer's disease, and other memory disorders will explain more about the differences between typical age-related changes and possible warning signs of dementia.
As we get older, cognitive problems become more noticeable for almost everybody, and it can vary from person to person. Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want right when they want it. They have trouble remembering names, and they don't think quite as quickly. What's more concerning, or what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. And then they start misplacing things, but not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, but more often. And it begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
So as Dr. Salloway pointed out, things that interfere with your ability to function in daily life, that's the warning signs. And we will go into warning signs just a little bit more later on in the presentation. So you may have heard the terms Alzheimer's and dementia used interchangeably. While they are related, there are important distinctions between the two. So we have a quick video of one of our Alzheimer's Association experts, Dr. Heather Snyder, explaining how Alzheimer's and dementia are related.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So as Dr. Snyder pointed out, a diagnosis of dementia is incomplete because it is an umbrella term used to describe a person's changes in memory, thinking, and behavior. There are many possible causes of dementia, but 60 to 80% of all dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's disease. Everyone is at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Although we don't know the exact cause of Alzheimer's, there are a few known common factors that increase a person's risk of developing disease. In the final video on this slide, Dr. Snyder will explain the most common risk factors.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease. And that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
And I know that video is a little choppy, especially for people that don't have higher internet speeds. When they designed our classes, I don't think they thought we'd be teaching them virtually quite so much, so they can be a little bit slow via the platform. So thank you so much for bearing with us. In addition to the main risk factors for the general population, Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at a higher risk for Alzheimer's. Research shows that older Hispanics are about 1.5 times as likely as older whites to develop Alzheimer's and other dementias, while older African Americans are about twice as likely to develop the disease as whites. The reason for these differences is not well understood, but researchers believe that higher rates of vascular disease in these groups may also put them at greater risk for developing Alzheimer's. Women are more likely than men to develop the disease. Over 3 million women are living with the disease today, 3 million American women. We know that women live longer than men, making them more likely to develop Alzheimer's. However, longevity and lower death rates can only partially explain this difference. Researchers are exploring how genetic differences between men and women may impact disease risk. So now we're going to have a little test. We're going to see what we've been hearing so far and test what we know about Alzheimer's. So you guys can just put in the chat here, Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process, true or false? So if you find your little chat, should be over to the right of the screen, go ahead and click and just put whether you think that's true or false. We're going to test how well people have been listening so far. Okay. All right. So that is false. Alzheimer's is a brain disease that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. It is not a normal part of aging. So you're going to hear that several times throughout the presentation today. It is not normal to develop memory problems that are so severe they impact your daily life. So let's try another question. What is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? So we have genetics, family history, and age. So go ahead and type into the chat what you think that is, and I'll give everybody just a couple of minutes. This is a good question because I think it comes up a lot in our daily lives. People kind of ask this a lot, what the greatest risk factor is. So it is age. So I know that we just sat there and said Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging, but it is the greatest risk factor. After the age of 65, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years, and 32% of people age 85 and older have Alzheimer's. So we're going to talk a little bit about the warning signs. The Alzheimer's Association, as a leader in this area, developed a list of 10 warning signs to help people understand the difference between normal aging and common signs of possible dementia. This list is intended to be a tool to help identify unusual changes in a person's memory, thinking, or behavior. It is important to note that this list does not constitute a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia. So due to time, we're not going to dive into the 10 warning signs individually today, but we will go through them and give a good overview of the warning signs. So number 1 is memory loss that disrupts daily life, such as forgetting recently learned information. Warning sign number 2 is challenges in planning or solving problems. Some people may have difficulty keeping track of monthly bills. So you may have noticed a family member who always paid everything on time, and suddenly you come over and there's past due notices, or the electricity or the gas is getting shut off. That can definitely be a warning sign. Number 3, difficulty completing familiar tasks, such as driving to a familiar location or organizing a grocery list. If anybody watched Still Alice, that movie, one of the things that happens with her is she's out running in the neighborhood on a route that she takes every day and suddenly becomes lost in her own neighborhood. Number 4 is confusion with time or place. A person living with dementia may sometimes forget where they are and how they got there. Number 5, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. The person may have problems judging distance and determining color or contrast, causing issues with driving. I know we've all heard about this with people who suddenly have, increase in accidents. That can definitely be a warning sign. 6 is new problems with words in speaking or writing. They may forget names and call everyday objects by the wrong name. And it's important to note new problems. So someone who has had a lifetime of challenges with speaking or writing, you have to take into account their level of literacy, but new problems is a sign. Number 7, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. Most people misplace things now and then, but someone living with Alzheimer's may put their keys in unusual places and even after finding them have no idea how they got there. The other day, my husband came to me and asked me why the Bluetooth speaker was in the freezer. So people do this no matter your age. I happened to be cleaning in the garage and I was listening to music and I somehow sat it down and it ended up in the freezer. So it does happen to anybody regardless of age, but I did remember how I got there. So number 8, decreased or poor judgment, such as when dealing with money. So you may notice that people who are developing signs of dementia often have what we refer to as low scam tolerance. So people are definitely more likely to have difficulty discerning that something is a scam if they are showing signs of dementia. And number 9, withdrawal from work or social activities, even hobbies that used to bring joy. And finally, number 10, changes in mood and personality. A person may become easily upset when out of their comfort zone. So it's important to note that individuals may experience one or more of these signs in varying degrees, and it's not necessary to experience every sign in order to raise concern. If you notice any of these signs in yourself or someone else, it's important to see a doctor. Only a healthcare professional can determine if the diagnosis is Alzheimer's or another dementia. And as a reminder, you can find out more information at alz.org/10signs, or you can consider taking one of our 10 warning signs classes, which goes into this in more detail. And just a note about questions, if you're typing your questions into the chat, we will take just a few moments after this presentation to address those questions. So certainly keep typing those in. My colleagues are keeping track of those, and we can take just a few minutes after this. And of course, at the end of the day, or the end of the session, we're going to have a few minutes, about 20 minutes with Dr. Allison Lindauer, where we'll get to ask more questions as well. Early detection and diagnosis. It's key that we pay attention to what's going on with our own cognitive health and not dismiss any changes that we may be experiencing as normal aging, as well as that of others around us. Any change that's unusual for your level of functioning or that of someone around you is cause for concern. So we're going to hear from another Alzheimer's Association expert, Ruth Drew, who will explain the importance of early detection of Alzheimer's.
There are a number of benefits in early detection of Alzheimer's. For one thing, a person is able to have a voice in what happens next. They can make plans. They can live life more on their own terms. They can also make plans for the future, financial plans, care plans. They can let people know what they want, which can be a real gift later on. It also allows time for families to make plans and to make decisions about who can do what and figure out care and those kinds of issues. Also, the treatments that are available for Alzheimer's don't cure Alzheimer's. They don't slow down the disease, but they do help with symptoms. And it seems as though they tend to work better the earlier a person is able to use those. So that can help too. Some people are interested in clinical trials. Clinical trials allow people to have access to treatments that aren't available yet. And for some people, that can be a really important thing to pursue.
Getting information and support is also a critical next step. So we're going to learn a little bit about what the Alzheimer's Association offers. So many of you who are here with us today are very familiar with our organization. I saw some really great familiar names of our volunteers and people that participate in our programs, but some of you may not be. So we just want to take a moment to let you know what we have. If any of these 10 signs spark some concern in you for yourself or anyone else, we want to let you know where you can go next. So the Alzheimer's Association is available wherever and whenever you need reliable information and support. We have 3 really key resources that can connect you to information and support. So first is our free 24/7 helpline. It provides access to highly trained and knowledgeable staff who can help with education, decision-making, support, crisis assistance, and resource identification.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center when I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did, was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
And also for 24/7 resources, we have our website, which is of course available anytime. It includes sections specifically for people caring for people living with the disease and people who have the disease.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, then I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has this been around, how many people are affected by this, where can I go for resources, where can I go for help, what do I do with this? How can I handle this? Is there more people like me out there? Is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
And finally, we have our community resource finder. The Community Resource Finder is great. It's a wealth of community-based resources, including long-term care and community-based services, our local Alzheimer's Association offices, and our offering of programs and services.
Since I've been diagnosed with dementia, the one place that I know I can go to for assistance and help and support is to the Alzheimer's Association. There are people there that I know by name that I can contact if I'm having a difficult time or if I'm struggling to find some resource, that they will provide that to me.
So as you heard, the Alzheimer's Association is a wealth of resources, and everything that we do for our constituents is completely free of charge. So we always want to point out that those services are made possible by fundraising and by our amazing volunteers. So if any of you on here who aren't already engaged with us and you're looking for ways to help and you're like, wow, that sounds like a great cause, how can I get involved? Here's a few ways you can help out. So you can volunteer. Whether you can spare a few hours a week or make a more significant time commitment, consider volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association. We have numerous opportunities available. You can become a community educator, join your local walk planning committee. If you go to alz.org/volunteer, you can learn a lot more about our volunteer opportunities. You can be an advocate, become an Alzheimer's Association advocate and speak out on behalf of the needs and rights of those facing Alzheimer's disease. And you can find out more about that at alzimpact.org. And actually, if one of my colleagues wants to put those web addresses into the chat, that would be great for everybody. So the alz.org/volunteer and the alzimpact.org. Trial match. Everyone can help advance Alzheimer's research by participating in clinical trials. You can get started with Alzheimer's Association Trial Match, a free, easy-to-use clinical studies matching service, and that's at alz.org/trialmatch. And finally, the Walk to End Alzheimer's. You can form or join a team for the Alzheimer's Association Walk to End Alzheimer's to help us raise critical funds and awareness. It's held annually in more than 600 communities nationwide, and it's our largest fundraising event for Alzheimer's care support and research. The walk is going to be in a little bit of a different format this year, so we will be looking at we won't be able to have the big walks all together, but it will be in different formats in our communities, and you're definitely going to hear a lot more about that in the coming days. So if you go to alz.org/walk or visit our Facebook page, we're going to be sharing a lot of information about that. So now we'll take some questions. I know you've already put some in the chat box, so I'll stop sharing so I can see those. And Stacy will also help me to let me know what kind of questions you all have.
Great. So Heidi, we saw a couple questions about the 10 warning signs. So specifically, is there a significance to the order of the warning signs on this list?
There's not. They're in order, so no particular warning sign really carries more weight than the other. The biggest thing is if something is very out of the ordinary for you or the person that you're caring for, the person that you're concerned about, that's the biggest thing with the warning signs. So they're all equally important, and as I think I mentioned during the presentation, you certainly don't have to notice all of them, and you don't have to be noticing all of them all of the time for there to be a concern. And then I see someone also said, how different are these warning signs from the other types of dementia? So those warning signs are specific to Alzheimer's disease. However, there is some overlap with other types of dementia as well. So it may be that you notice these warning signs in someone and that perhaps they're experiencing another type of dementia, maybe vascular dementia, frontotemporal, something like that. So there definitely is some overlap in these warning signs, and they are designed to really notice a change in somebody. So that's the biggest thing, is those changes in memory, thinking, or behavior that are severe enough to impact daily life.
We have time probably for another question or two. If anyone has a question specific to the Introduction to Alzheimer's class that Heidi just presented, or Alzheimer's disease, or the Alzheimer's Association. Otherwise, we'll continue on with our presentation, and as Heidi mentioned, we'll have more time for Q&A later in the session.
Perfect.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, hold on. We just had one come through, Heidi. Are there different stages, and how long can each last?
Sure. So I'm assuming you mean different stages of Alzheimer's disease. So the Alzheimer's Association tends to recognize a 3-stage model. If anybody's done any research on the disease, you'll see anything from, the 3-stage model to a 7-stage model, but we'll say early, middle, and late, or mild, moderate, and severe. Typically, people will say those stages can last, 2 to 3 years each. However, that is different for every person. So there may be people that stay in the early stage for many, many years and progress through the other stages very quickly, and vice versa. So it's very individual. We definitely say when you've met one person with Alzheimer's disease, you have met one person with Alzheimer's disease. So there's no hard and fast rule on how fast those stages will progress. You're welcome. Okay. So now we're going to talk about 10 ways to love your brain. We like to do things in tens, apparently. So we have our 10 warning signs, and we have our little infographic on the 10 ways to love your brain. So one of the big things that people ask us when we're out in the community is, how do I avoid getting Alzheimer's disease? So growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. When possible, you can combine these habits to achieve maximum benefit for the brain and body. And the biggest thing is start now. It's never too late or too early to incorporate healthy habits. So if you're thinking to yourself, gosh, it's just too late, doesn't matter now, it's not. It's never too late, and it's definitely never too early. As we've all been working from home, our staff, the very first one is break a sweat. So our staff know that because we're all working from home now, we might be a little more inclined to be sedentary. So we have a 10,000 step challenge to see if we can get to 10,000 steps a day. Several studies have found an association between physical activity and reduced risk of cognitive decline. So engage in regular cardiovascular exercise that elevates your heart rate and increases blood flow. We want to make an important note that just because you can't go out and run 6 miles does not mean that you can't do cardiovascular activity. Do what you can. Walk for 5 minutes, walk for 2 minutes, walk around the block, and then tomorrow walk a little bit further. So do as much as you can do. Anything is going to be better than nothing. Hit the books. Formal education in any stage of life will help reduce your risk of cognitive decline and dementia. For example, take a class at a local college, community center, or online, or come to the Healthy Brain Symposium and learn all kinds of new facts about Alzheimer's disease. Number 3 is butt out. Evidence shows that smoking increases risk of cognitive decline. By quitting smoking, you can reduce that risk to levels comparable to those who have not smoked. So if you're smoking, stop. I know it's not that easy, but it is one of the most important things you can do for your cognitive health. Number 4 is follow your heart. Evidence shows that risk factors for cardiovascular disease and stroke, obesity, high blood pressure, and diabetes negatively impact your cognitive health. What is good for the heart is good for the brain. Number 5 is heads up. Brain injury can raise your risk of cognitive decline and dementia. So wear a seatbelt, use a helmet when playing contact sports or riding a bike, and take steps to prevent falls. Step number 6 is fuel up right. Eat a healthy and balanced diet that is lower in fat and higher in vegetables and fruit to help reduce the risk of cognitive decline. Although research on diet and cognitive function is limited, certain diets, including Mediterranean and Mediterranean DASH, which is dietary approaches to stop hypertension, may contribute to risk reduction. So as you're hearing these first 6, everybody wants kind of the magic pill of how do I prevent dementia, but with most chronic diseases, the key is diet and exercise, as we're seeing. So unfortunately, we don't have the magic pill. We actually have to take care of ourselves and eat healthy. Number 7 is catch some Z's. Not getting enough sleep due to conditions like insomnia or sleep apnea may result in problems with memory and thinking. So Dr. Lindauer is going to come back with us a little bit later, and she's going to dive deeper into the topic of sleep. Number 8 is take care of your mental health. Some studies link a history of depression with increased risk of cognitive decline. So seek medical treatment if you have symptoms of depression, anxiety, or other mental health concerns. Also, try to manage stress. I always like to put that in there, try to manage stress. We are going to do a deep dive into the mental health piece as well and talk about some ways that you can manage stress. Number 9 is buddy up. Staying socially engaged may support brain health. Find a way to be part of your local community and volunteer for a cause that's meaningful to you, like the Alzheimer's Association. We're a great cause to volunteer for. And number 10 is stump yourself. Challenge and activate your mind. Build a piece of furniture, complete a jigsaw puzzle, do something artistic. Play games that make you think strategically. Challenging your mind may have short and long-term benefits for your brain. So those are kind of the 10 ways to love your brain that we come up with. And I see there's a couple of quick questions. So we have one that says, if someone sustains a brain injury when they are young, are they at a higher risk of Alzheimer's when they get older? So there have been several studies that show that traumatic brain injury in particular does increase the chances that someone may get dementia as they get older. And repeated head injuries actually do have a correlation with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And then we have, is there evidence about the role of grain/carbs in Alzheimer's versus a high protein /paleo diet? So there's, as I said in the 10 ways to love your brain and the fuel up right section, diet and cognitive function, research on diet and cognitive function is kind of limited. but we have shown that certain diets like the Mediterranean and the Mediterranean DASH diet may contribute to the risk reduction. So we don't have a lot of research on the low carb diets and their ability to impact your risk. So right now, the worldwide FINGERS study is going on. And there's the U.S. Pointer study, which is the U.S.'s specific branch, and it's specifically investigating multifaceted lifestyle interventions such as diet. So we are definitely getting more and more research out there regarding the link between diet and Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Any other quick questions on that before we move on? Okay. So speaking of stump yourself, we're going to do a little bit of trivia on the brain. So this is going to show who was listening while I was talking earlier, because a lot of these questions are coming straight out of the presentation that we just did. So we're not making it too challenging on you this morning, but we did throw a couple in there that aren't open book, so to speak, that we didn't talk about this morning. So the first thing is, first question is, Alzheimer's and dementia are the same thing, true or false? So if you want to just go ahead and chat in your answers, and we'll let you know the answer. Good. So we've got a smart group this morning, and you were listening. So that is false. Dementia is a syndrome or a collection of symptoms. It is what the person experiences, not what causes the experience. Alzheimer's is a disease or the biological cause of the dementia. So while they are related terms, they are not the same. Question number 2. What is the greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? So we have genetics, age, and family history. Just give everybody a minute, just chat in what you think it is. Okay. So we have several people that said age, and age is the correct answer. So while these are all risk factors for Alzheimer's disease and other dementia, the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's and other dementias is increasing age. But keep in mind that Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. While age increases the risk, it is not a direct cause of Alzheimer's. Question number says question number 2, but it's not question number 2. I was just going to read that. Certain populations of people are more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease than others. Is this true or false? True, true, true. We've got lots of trues. Very good. Deli is getting all the answers right because she spends a lot of time with us. So this is true. Researchers have shown that older Latinos are about 1.5 times as likely as older whites to have Alzheimer's and other dementias, while older African Americans are about twice as likely to have the disease as older whites. So we talked about this earlier. And again, just to reiterate, the reason for that is really not well understood. Definitely requires more research to figure out why that is. But we do think it has to do with higher rates of vascular disease in these groups, which is often due to health disparities in middle age. Okay, next question. About how many nerve cells does the adult brain contain? So is it 100 million, 100 billion, or 100 trillion? So we've got million, billion, or trillion. What do we think? Oh, everybody's quiet on this one. We may have finally stumped you. Okay. Abby says it's 100 billion. Hi, Abby. Perfect. I wonder if you guys were quiet for so long because you were Googling the answer. That is correct. It is 100 billion nerve cells. Your brain gets much of its power from 100 billion nerve cells or neurons that control reading, remembering, deciding, moving your body, and other activities that involve thinking and planning. In Alzheimer's disease, brain cells lose their ability to form new connections with other cells. As the disease gets worse, nerve cells begin to die. The death of brain cells is what causes the death of nerve cells destroys the brain's ability to understand the world. So apparently my brain cells are doing that right now. And then finally, our final question is, there are currently medications that can slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Is this true or false? Go ahead and chat that in. Got lots of falses. Good. We've got one true. So that is actually false. And that's a bit of a trick question because I know that you've heard a lot in the news on medications for Alzheimer's disease. So there are medications available for people with Alzheimer's, but these drugs do not stop or reverse the disease. They are cognitive enhancers and they treat symptoms of the disease. So what we really want are medications that would stop or at least slow the progress of the underlying brain disease. The good news is there are many medications in clinical trials today that are designed to do just that. So what we don't have right now is we don't have a disease-modifying drug out there on the market that will actually do anything to change the underlying mechanisms of the disease. They can just help with the symptoms. So you'll often hear, people are doing better, their cognition is appearing better, but it's really just kind of slowing down that progression and giving them some relief in the symptoms. And that's one of the reasons that early detection and diagnosis is so important, because the earlier that we can get to somebody in their symptoms, the better those drugs are going to work for them and the more they'll be able to actually address their symptoms. Perfect. Well, you guys did great on the trivia questions. Thank you. So our next stump yourself, our next way to love your brain, we're going to talk a little bit about taking care of your mental health. And I said that we'd give you some tips on this. So this is incredibly important. Alzheimer's disease has a devastating impact, not just on those with the disease, it's also an extreme burden on their caregivers. Alzheimer's caregivers frequently report experiencing high levels of stress. It can be overwhelming to take care of your loved one with Alzheimer's or other dementia, but too much stress can be harmful to both of you. As a caregiver, you may find yourself with so many responsibilities that you neglect taking good care of yourself. But the best thing that you can do for the person you are caring for is to stay physically and emotionally strong. So I know you've all heard this. This is an overused phrase. Put on your own oxygen mask before you help the person next to you. But the reason that it's an overused phrase is because it's such a good analogy. If you're on the airplane and you have a person that you're caring for next to you and you put on their oxygen mask first, you run the risk of passing out before you can actually help them, and then you're both in trouble. So it's the same thing with being a caregiver. You absolutely have to take care of yourself or you're not going to be able to take care of the person living with dementia. So the first thing that you should do is get help and find support. So the Alzheimer's Association has some great resources for this. We have our online care team calendar that can help you organize friends and family who want to help provide care and support. So all of those people that come to you and say, what can I do? How can I help? You can organize them with their online care team calendar and actually give them some ideas of how to help. And right now, I know a lot of people, we're still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's difficult to have that outside help come in. So we've been letting families know a great way to take some of the stress off of you when friends and family want to help is to have them perform some of those non-contact chores. So maybe they can come over and mow the lawn. They don't have to come inside the house to mow the lawn. Maybe they can get the trash cans to the curb. They can go to the grocery store and drop off groceries for you. There's a lot of things that people can still do for you that don't involve contact with the household and don't involve increasing that risk. So remember, just because you may be limited in how many people can come into the home, there's still ways that you can get help. We have our Alls Connected online community, and so you can go online and you can chat with other folks all across the country that are experiencing the same thing that you are. And then we also have our local support groups, which are great sources for finding comfort and reassurance. So our support groups are still meeting. They're meeting virtually right now. So we have kind of a mix of support groups that are meeting via phone and support groups that are meeting via platforms like this where everybody can all see each other. It just kind of depends what the group is comfortable with. And in your program, you'll find the resources to go and find our support groups. So if anybody's interested in that, we can certainly help you out there. So the next thing is really just knowing what community resources are available. So in non-pandemic times, we have adult day programs. I don't think those are operating again yet, so I know those aren't an option right now. But in-home assistance is still an option. And while you might be concerned about that, I know many of the home care companies in the area have taken the step to get their staff educated on COVID-19, and they're taking necessary precautions. So if that's something that you need in your home, definitely that's still an option out there for you. I just make sure that you ask the questions of the company on, what their policies are and how they're handling everything, and make sure their infection control standards are up to date, but it's still a great resource. There's visiting nurses and also meal delivery. Meal delivery is a great service right now. There's a lot of organizations offering it. You can reach out to the local ADRC and see what resources are available, as well as, there's all the commercial delivery apps like Grubhub and Postmates and all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot, you can get just about anything delivered to your door right now. You can use our online community resource finder for assistance in finding Alzheimer's care resources in your community. And if you are overwhelmed by the community resource finder, you can call the 24/7 helpline. And I know we'll make sure that's in your program, but we can also put it into the chat as well, because our 24/7 helpline team can help you find resources. Become an educated caregiver. So as the disease progresses, new caregiving skills might be necessary. We offer a lot of educational programs to help you better understand and cope with the behaviors and personality changes that often accompany Alzheimer's. And finally, find some time for yourself. Consider taking advantage of respite care. So if you do have an option for respite care, take some time to do something that you enjoy. So it can provide a temporary rest from caregiving while the person with Alzheimer's disease continues to receive care in a safe environment. And you don't have to do something, doesn't have to be anything major. Maybe it's going for a walk by yourself. Maybe it's going to the store. Maybe it's going to get your nails done. I know that that's finally an option again for some folks, and if you're comfortable with that, you can definitely do that. So certainly taking advantage of just those little opportunities to do something for yourself. And we're going to talk a little bit about relaxation techniques. So remember I said we tell you to manage your stress. And I always kind of laugh because it's like, try not to be stressed. Well, okay, that's not very helpful. And so there's several simple relaxation techniques that can help relieve stress. So the techniques include visualization. So maybe mentally picturing a place or situation that's peaceful and calm. My husband does video, so he's a video producer, and so he actually made me a really nice video of the place where my family goes camping, and he calls it my bad day video. So I can watch that, and I can see the creek, and I can hear it, and it's just a really nice thing. So, if I can't visualize it, I can actually watch that. Then there's meditation. Meditation can be as simple as just dedicating a few minutes a day to letting go of your stressful thoughts. So I think sometimes people hear meditation and they get really overwhelmed and think, I don't know how to do that. But there's lots of ways, and we're going to go through a couple of those to make sure that you can kind of take advantage of that. So meditation is great. Breathing exercises. So slowing your breathing and focusing on taking deep breaths. So just as simple as like sitting down in your chair and just taking a few deep breaths can actually be incredibly helpful for people. And then progressive muscle relaxation, which is tightening and then relaxing each muscle group, starting at one end of your body and working your way to the other end. So if anybody's ever done yoga, particularly yin yoga, you'll notice that they do a lot of that, and it can be very relaxing. So we thought today we would kind of walk you through a brief guided meditation. So there's several really great apps for this. One of them is called Calm. It happens to be the one that I've used for myself. So let's see. I put these in my favorites for you, and then of course they like to just disappear. So let's see. So what we're going to walk through is just a quick 3-minute body scan. So she's going to guide us all through it. For those of you who are worried about other people seeing you close your eyes, you can turn your camera off so no one can see you. But if everybody's participating, everybody's eyes will be closed and you don't have to worry about it anyway. So we're going to go ahead and start this and just go ahead and listen and take that few moments to do this body scan with us.
Welcome to this 3-minute guided body scan. Start by finding a comfortable position with a straight back and close your eyes. Rest your hands gently and allow your shoulders to relax. And take a few deep breaths to ground you in this moment. Feeling your breath as it enters your body and as it leaves your body. Follow the calming breath, the soothing breath, the breath that connects the mind and body. And now bring your attention to your head, feeling into your scalp, forehead, and face. Allow all the muscles in your head and face to soften. And lower your focus to the neck and shoulders, noticing any sensation here. Bringing awareness to your arms, all the way through to the wrists, palms, and fingers. Observing any sensation that arises on the surface of the skin or deeper within. Now scan your back, and if you notice any intensity, direct the breath into that area to allow for a softening. Feel into the belly, observing its rise and fall, rise and fall. And scan your pelvis and hips, moving your attention all the way into the legs and feet. Letting them relax and become soft. And now settle into the stillness that comes from paying attention to your body, part by part. And when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and toes. Come back to the room and open your eyes. Enjoy this relaxed, peaceful state and take it with you into your day.
All right. We might have put you all to sleep right now. So hopefully that was helpful. And, you know, those kinds of apps, there's Calm, there's Headspace, there's all kinds of things. Most of them have some free things, so you don't have to pay for it. You can have some free programming, and they just kind of help. That way you don't have to decide what you're going to do on your own. You can just kind of go through something quick, and you'll be surprised kind of how energized you'll feel. You know, sometimes if I'm having a slump in the middle of the day and I'm just kind of frustrated and tired, I'll do that just kind of in the middle of the day, take a few moments for myself, and it really does help. So hopefully that's helpful. And speaking of putting you to sleep, Allison Lindauer is back with us. Not that Allison's going to put us to sleep. She's going to talk about sleep. Sorry, Allison. So I'm just going to pull up Dr. Lindauer's slides, and let me, Stacy, while I pull those up, can you introduce Dr. Lindauer?
Absolutely, yes. So Dr. Allison Lindauer is a nationally certified gerontological nurse practitioner at Oregon Health and Science University. With over 15 years experience in aging care, Dr. Lindauer conducts research on dementia caregiving and telehealth, and she also serves on our local board of directors. So as Heidi mentioned, Dr. Lindauer is going to talk a little bit about our sleep and cognition related to catching some Z's, which, if you remember, is one of the 10 ways to love your brain. So with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Lindauer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. And I hope I can keep you awake long enough. This is a talk that I do like to discuss because, as they've been pointing out, sleep is so critical, and I want to review that. So next slide, please. Before I get too far into that, I just want to let you know who we are. I work at the Latent Aging and Alzheimer's Disease Center. We're one of 31 NIH-funded Alzheimer's Disease Centers of Excellence across the U.S. and the only one between Sacramento and Seattle. We do a variety of things. We provide clinical care to families living with dementia, but we also do quite a bit of research that spans everything from technology-based research to drug trials to caregiving research to understand how to support caregivers as they do their work. And that's my email, so if you have questions or you want to contact me, feel free. Next slide, please. So sleep, as you know, has many functions. What I find fascinating, of course, is obviously physical and mental rest, mood, and coping. But the sleep also helps us consolidate our memories. So what we learn here today, sleep when we're asleep tonight, it'll kind of help pull it together for us. And the other thing that sleep does that actually one of our researchers is working on at OHSU is trying to understand how the brain cleans itself up. And it seems to be that at nighttime, the brain works to reduce the amount of amyloid in it. And as you know, excess amyloid is one of the causes or one of the contributors to dementia. We all have amyloid proteins in our brain. People with Alzheimer's have far too much. So sleep is very important to helping us cope, think, and protect our health over time. Next slide, please. What's interesting about sleep is that it's not the same for all of us at different ages. So if any of you have been around a newborn, you know that they are just kind of all over the place. Babies sleep quite a bit and nap, and teenagers, it says 9 hours a night. That kind of cracks me up. I think it's more like 10 or 12, and it's not at night, is it? It's midnight to 11 a.m. And that's because their sleep cycle is naturally shifted towards morning. And as we get older, our sleep has changed too. So instead of wanting to get 8 hours of sleep at night, many of us get between 6 and 7 hours of sleep at night. And so when people come to me and say, I'm just so frustrated, all I want is 8 solid hours of sleep. Well, if you're over 50, it's probably a good idea to just kiss that dream goodbye. It rarely happens, and instead of yearning for 8 hours of sleep, we need to figure out how to make our sleep most effective and get the rest we need across the course of a day. I'm not going to go into the types of sleep because I don't have too much time, but next slide, please. And so as we get older, our sleep, it becomes quite variable and more fragmented. We sleep for shorter periods of time, and we tend to feel a little bit more sleepy during the day. Our sleep is more active, and we feel a little less rested. And our circadian rhythms tend to shift a little bit. For example, we may go to bed later, we may wake up at 3, 4, or 5 in the morning, but then need a nap later in the day. Next slide. Let's see, next slide, please. So we know that sleep affects how we think. And we know that people who get fewer than 6.5 hours of sleep a night are at a little bit higher risk of mild cognitive impairment, meaning difficulty with some difficulty with cognition, but not dementia. We also know that people who have excessive daytime sleepiness have a higher risk of mild cognitive impairment. People with insomnia, that's a limited risk. There doesn't seem to be an association between insomnia and mild cognitive impairment. And thank heavens, daytime naps are protective. So if you're the type of person that can't go to sleep at night, but you really want to take a nap during the day, do take a nap between 20 minutes to an hour during the day. Next slide, please. One of the reasons that we notice impairments in cognition is it's likely that people who aren't sleeping 6.5 hours may have sleep disordered breathing. And I know many of you have talked to your team members, your friends, about sleep apnea. But remember, sleep apnea is you're kind of constantly waking up because your airway's being blocked and you're not getting enough oxygen. And it affects many of us. And we also know that sleep apnea is associated with increased risk of mild cognitive impairment. Go ahead and advance, please. The reason we get so worried about mild cognitive impairment is that increases your risk for advancing to Alzheimer's disease. For people who have sleep disordered breathing, that affects their memory, their attention, their judgment. You've all seen people who fall asleep just kind of suddenly, they're not sleeping well. This slide shows when a person's asleep, in a blocked airway, the uvula drops down and the airway is blocked. Sorry, I have to cough a little bit. Next slide, please. And so to treat that, we often use CPAP with these machines that help open up the airway. But the other thing that's really important to know is in many cases, we're learning that you can actually use oral devices like a little mouth guard that's specifically designed for sleep apnea. And what the mouth guard does is it doesn't just protect your teeth, it actually adjusts your jaw just a little bit by a couple millimeters, and that actually helps with sleep apnea. So when you're talking to people or when you're worried like, oh, I don't want to get a sleep assessment because I know I'll never do CPAP, definitely do an assessment because there are options other than CPAP. Next slide, please. So just to talk briefly about improving the quality of sleep for you, it is important when you're awake to get 20 minutes of exercise at least every day. I mean, we know now that we need to get 40 to 50 minutes of exercise 4 to 5 times a week. Try to get as much sunshine as you can. This is hard in Oregon in the winter. I recommend buying a blue light so you get that multi-spectrum light. follow the instructions on the light. But what we're learning is that full spectrum light can really help sleep. So if you do the bright light in the morning, it really will help your sleep at night. To the extent that when facilities call me and let me know that somebody's having some behavioral symptoms, one of the things I will do is ask them to give that person a bright light so they get some brain stimulation in the morning and then they sleep better at night. Avoid caffeinated drinks after lunch and take a nap. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you want to, by all means. And try to be kind of a lark. Be active in the mornings and just kind of slow down as you go through the day. And then I know you've heard this over and over, but it's really important to socialize with other people. Not only does that help your sleep at night, but it also is protective against dementia. Next slide, please. Of course, avoid strenuous activity before bed. Do something that you enjoy. Be optimistic. Next slide, please. And go to bed when you're tired. And please avoid watching TV or something distressing before you sleep. If you can't go to sleep, get up, get out of bed, and do an activity until you're tired. And don't worry that you can't sleep. My mother used to, if I couldn't sleep, I would just get all anxious, and she'd be like, no, you're okay. If you're just in bed and quiet, your body's still resting, and don't worry about it. And that just helped, even to this day, that advice helps me, just because if we worry about it, then we're not going to sleep. The other thing that you can try that I find very helpful for both me and my patients is you can't sleep, you get out of bed, make your room as cold as you can. Turn up the AC, turn up the fan, open the windows, make it really, really cold. Make your bed again, smooth out your sheets, make it nice and neat. Then go and do an activity until you're tired. When you come back to bed, your room is going to be cold, and you just really want to get under the covers and snuggle, and that does seem to help. That advice is from a psychiatric specialist I worked with for quite a while, and I think that it actually does really help. Next slide, please. And recognize when you can't go to sleep that that's normal if you're over 50. Again, all this stuff we talked about. Next slide. Please don't drink alcohol. If you're having like chronic sleep problems, I would try to cut out alcohol as much as possible because alcohol disrupts what we call the sleep architecture. It's not a funny word. It affects kind of the pattern of our sleep. So if you're having chronic troubles with sleep and you have a glass of wine at night, try to cut that out and see if that doesn't help. If you're having a bad night and you normally don't drink, don't start now. Again, you'll fall asleep, but then you'll probably wake up. And please avoid medications with PM in them. Next slide, please. I'll show you what I mean. So all of these medications, you'll see like Tylenol PM, Motrin PM, Walsam, Unisom. These medications use an anticholinergic medicine, often diphenhydramine, that will make you go to sleep and frankly will probably help you stay asleep. But these medications increase our risk of cognitive impairment. If you think about it, when we are treating somebody with Alzheimer's disease, we give them medicine such as Aricept to increase the amount of choline in the brain that helps the brain cells communicate. These medications, as you see on the title, are anticholinergic, anticholine. So they block choline. And so eventually they can affect memory. I would avoid these if you can. The Advil part, the Motrin part, the Tylenol part, fine. It's the PM or the SOM part that you want to avoid. Next slide, please. Also, these medications, which are used for anxiety, they also increase the risk of developing cognitive impairment. If you do need them, just work really closely with your provider to make sure you limit the doses as much as possible and treat the condition that's at the root of the problem. So for example, if Ativan is used for anxiety, there are safer medications such as SSRIs, like Zoloft, that are probably more effective for anxiety in the long term and safer. And the non-benzodiazepines like Sonata, Ambien, they also increase our risk. So the advice is to have fewer than 30 doses per year. So if you need one while you're flying or something, fine, but don't take it regularly. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Big X there. Is that it? No. Okay. So this just kind of goes back to people that use these medications had a twofold increased risk of developing dementia. And the authors, Chen and his colleagues or her colleagues, suggested that use of these medications, both the hypnotics such as the Ativan and the non-hypnotics such as the Sonata and Ambien should be considered a risk factor for dementia. So we really try to avoid those if we can. In some cases you need them, right? So it has to be an informed decision. Go ahead and next slide, please. And that's all I have because I don't have much time. So I'd love to hear your questions and we could have a conversation.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lindauer. And thank you, Heidi, as well for walking us through the 10 ways to love your brain. So now we're going to shift into what we're calling our Ask a Researcher Q&A. And I just saw we had a question pop up, so this is perfect timing. Now is the time to ask any of your burning questions about healthy aging and cognitive health. And Dr. Lindauer is going to be available to wrap up our presentation today with the next 15 minutes focused on Q&A. So if you haven't already, please take a moment to enter your question into the chat box on the right-hand side of the Blue Jeans webinar window. And Heidi, I believe, is going to help with selecting and reading questions for Dr. Lindauer to answer. So we'll give everyone just a second or two. And Heidi, it looks like we have a couple questions already if you want to kick us off here.
Sure. So the first question, Dr. Lindauer, is what about melatonin? So when you're talking about sleep medications, that's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, and it's a good drug. And that's our go-to medication when people do want something to help with sleep. Melatonin we have it naturally in our bodies. The hormone increases to when the time we go to sleep in the evening, and as we get older, the amount of melatonin in our body goes down. So yes, that's fine to supplement. Make sure it's a reliable product. Start with about 1 milligram and then increase. What melatonin will do will help you fall asleep. It won't keep you asleep. So sometimes I'll have families take one like an hour before bedtime and then another one if they wake up in the middle of the night. But yeah, melatonin's a great option, and that's pretty much the only one we suggest.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And our next question is MCI, mild cognitive impairment, a risk factor for dementia, or is it an early manifestation of dementia? That's a good question, too.
That's a great question. What we know is that I think it's about 20 to 30% of people with mild cognitive impairment do advance to dementia. But I don't think we know for sure if it's just kind of early stage or if it's its own entity. I think that the jury's still out on that. We all know people who have a little bit of impairment but function really, really well for multiple years. And then we also know people where it seems like it's the early stages of dementia. Mostly it's what we see over time, and we really hone in on function. So for example, if somebody has trouble with short-term memory, but they can still do all the things they need to do, get dressed, take a bath, do their laundry, cook their food, they can do all of those. They're highly functional, and so we call that mild cognitive impairment. Sorry, I don't have the exact answer on that, but it is a tricky question.
I think you have the best answer that we have
Yeah,
on that. So
thank you, Heidi.
And one of the
Appreciate the
things,
support.
Not everyone that develops mild cognitive impairment goes on to develop dementia, like Dr.
That's
Lindau
true.
said. So
That's so true.
It really just is a game, not a game, but a looking at over time what develops. So
yeah,
so that is
very true. Very true. Thank you.
Our next one is how much winter Oregon outside time is equal to 15 minutes of natural bright light?
I wish I knew that. Gosh, you guys are asking hard questions. I have no idea. I have no idea. But you'll notice, right? I don't know if this happens to you. It certainly happens to me. Sorry, my husband's printing. You get kind of down and you get kind of low energy in the winter, and you're just like, all you want to do is have a glass of red wine and go to sleep. When I start feeling that way, that's when I get our blue light on. And you'll notice you get just a little bit of a boost. So even though I'm pretty active and I'm outside a lot, I still need that full spectrum light. So I just, around November, we turn on the light. I do it in the morning when I have my coffee, and you want it kind of on your side. You don't want to look right into it, but kind of on the side for about 15 minutes, and that should help.
How much does a sleep study cost on average?
That's a great question. I don't know how much a sleep study costs. Theoretically, if you have insurance, it should be covered by your insurance. And the way it works is you see a sleep specialist or your primary care provider who orders the sleep study. And then if they order it, then your insurance theoretically should reimburse it because it's a medical assessment.
Yeah. And the question was specifically for people with high deductibles. So I would say on that question, you probably want to call your insurance provider. They can do really well with letting you know what's covered and give you a good example of what that should cost. So if you work with the provider and the insurance company, they can help you with that. It's going to be different for a lot of folks.
That's a great advice, and I would advise if it's the cost of the sleep study that's keeping you from seeing the sleep specialist, but you feel you need to see the sleep specialist, which is also expensive, I would definitely do that because the sleep specialists are so valuable in helping us tease out what the problem is, and they may not even order a sleep study. Or if you tell them, look, I can't afford a sleep study, they may be able to think of ways to help get the information without a full-blown study. So for example, they may be able to order home oxygen monitoring overnight just to see if your oxygen dips. So don't let if you can see sleep specialists for your issue, do try to do that.
That's good advice, Allison. Thank you.
Of course.
Does a person have to have a stroke to have vascular dementia?
Oh, that's a great question. Not necessarily. If you think about vascular dementia, the same concept is with cardiovascular disease. So, for example, you don't have to have a heart attack to have cardiovascular disease, but you know that the blood vessels are narrow and it can affect your heart. With vascular dementia, we will see shrinking of the brain that's due to impaired blood flow to the brain, and it could be because of a one large stroke or decreased blood flow due to tight arteries to the exterior or to the outer parts of the brain. Typically, a person with vascular dementia doesn't always have a big stroke, but they have lots of what we call like mini tiny strokes. They don't even know they had them. So to look at a scan, an MRI scan, in somebody with dementia, if they had none of these mini strokes, it does call into question whether this is vascular dementia or if it's a Alzheimer's disease? That's a very tricky question, and I can't tell you how many hours we spend on it in our clinical conferences because it's not an easy answer.
Yeah. This is a group with really good questions. And
yeah, no kidding. I appreciate them. Keep me thinking. Really appreciate that.
We're helping Allison with her brain health right now.
Exactly. Keeping me on my game.
The next one is, have there been any advances in helping to diagnose delirium when sleep/wake cycles are substantially impaired?
Oh, I'm not a delirium specialist, but I can give it a guess. As far the main thing that I think, the main advance, I think is the word that you're using, and I think is a good one, is that we're much more aware of it. In the past, we just were kind of like, oh, I don't know, that we didn't appreciate the scope of delirium. We didn't appreciate how devastating it could be. We didn't realize that it could be a quiet delirium where somebody just kind of tunes out. So I think the biggest advance is the awareness of it. The treatments are also, I think, improving. For example, if a person has to have major surgery, we know that certain anesthesias can increase the risk. So surgeons are very tuned in to, are there different ways that we can provide the anesthesia to reduce that risk? And then the treatment of delirium, there's a scientist, Sharon Inouye, I think was her name. She has some really great research, and what she learned, and this is a while back, what she learned is really excellent nursing care can help improve delirium. So the things I talked about, walking, getting up, walking, exercising. If a person's in the hospital or in facility, sadly, we can't these days, be with family that you know. Remember what I was talking about, getting the cold room with the bed all nice and smooth. That's important. And a nice warm drink before going to bed. And that helps get a good night's sleep, and that can help with the delirium. So exercise is really important, as well as getting a good night's sleep. Again, difficult question, but very important one.
Perfect. And along those same lines, Allison, someone asked, can we explain what we mean by delirium? And also, are we specifically talking about the in-hospital type?
Great question. So delirium is an acute, meaning a sudden state. It's not dementia. It's sudden. It's like the brain is just having a really hard time making sense of what's going on in the world. It can be something like having hallucinations, like seeing spiders on you, or being fearful or delusional. It can cause people to be really agitated. Or it can be a quiet delirium where all people do is just kind of withdraw and don't engage with the world. Delirium is not dementia, but people who have dementia are at higher risk for developing delirium. A lot of times it does happen in the hospital because it's such a foreign environment, and people go to the hospital oftentimes because they're sick or they have an injury. So the illness or their injury can also be a precursor to delirium. So they don't necessarily have to be in the hospital to experience it. But those are the things that can trigger it. So people who are sick for another reason, like maybe they have the flu, or unfortunately COVID, or they've had hip surgery, those people are at risk for delirium. And people recover from delirium. People with Alzheimer's or another dementia do improve, and their delirium can resolve. Oftentimes, however, it does affect the memory, and they can't quite get that back. So what I tell the families I work with, sorry about the cat, that I work with is, if you have to have a surgery, like for example, you have a broken hip and you have to have the surgery, you have to have it, talk with the surgeon, talk with the anesthesiologist, make sure we reduce that risk. But if you don't have to have surgery, do your best to avoid it. So for example, I had a family really angry with me once because the PCP recommended a colonoscopy, and because the person had dementia, they gave the person a general anesthesia. And after the colonoscopy, because of the general anesthesia, the person developed a significant delirium. And the family was angry because I didn't tell them that that would happen. Now, we don't need to get into the weeds about all the pieces of that, but I kind of agree. Now I tell everybody, don't do a surgery unless you really feel it's really important and it's going to affect your quality of life. I could talk about that for 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got 2 more questions in the chat, and that'll be about all we have time for today. So if we didn't get to your question, or if you come up with one later, feel free to type it in, and I'll make sure that we reach back out to you and answer those. So the question is there a link between diabetes and dementia, in particular vascular dementia? Another great question.
Yeah, there is. And again, another area that I'm not very good at. Yes, diabetes, as you know, sets us up for cerebrovascular disease and cardiovascular disease. So it definitely increases the risk of vascular dementia. So when people have diabetes, we work very hard to make sure that we keep their blood sugar levels as tightly controlled as we can. We also think that there's another type of dementia that seems to stem from diabetes. That's an area I don't know a lot about, but there definitely is a relationship. So again, the important message here is that we really want to keep the diabetes well managed, not only the blood sugars, but the cholesterol and the high blood pressure that often go with diabetes.
Absolutely. And the last question is, what specifically should we look for when shopping for a full spectrum blue light? Is there some specific?
I don't know. Isn't that horrible? I don't know. I would go online, look around, look for a full spectrum light, and look for one perhaps from a company that is respectable or that gets a lot of good reviews, but definitely full spectrum. And then follow the instructions on the light, because the intensity of the light can vary. So you want to make sure that you follow the instructions. Sorry, I don't know the answer to that. Well, but I will ask Miranda Lim, who's doing that research, and see what she says.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We've officially hit 11:30, so let's go ahead and give a virtual round of applause for Amy and the Vital Life Foundation, Heidi and Dr. Lindauer. Thank you again to everyone who's joined us today. Please do feel free to share and reference the additional resources and information that we've included in the virtual program. We provided that via email earlier this morning, and I also saw at one point that someone had dropped the link to that in the chat box. So if you scroll up, you can click on it. And we also encourage you to visit alz.org for more information about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, as well as brain health. So it's been an educational and fun time. We hope you enjoyed yourself, learned something new today, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.